What do you want to cover? I did. Oh, in the other class, I worked a bunch of problems from chapters 10 through 13 quiz. We could work different ones from 10 to 13. What are tasks, not quiz? Or from a different one. We've done nothing from 5 to 9. We need to do that in the review session, or do some of these in the review session. I don't care. What would you guys like to work? Want to do some stuff from 5 to 9? So we don't have overlap with theirs? That'd be fine. Okay? That'd be cool. So, anyway. And then you guys at your leisure, I know this is going to be fun. You can watch whatever you want, and I'll try to label them a little bit if I can remember. I did the other ones. I think the other day in the review session we did, you were there, weren't you? A couple of you guys, you were there too. We did bonds, didn't we? And we did bank reconciliation. That was mostly it. Yeah, for that period of time. Yeah.
For like the upcoming trial, just work through tests and quizzes.
Oh yeah, I would know how to do every single question on the test just instantly, just automatic. I could do it. And then the same thing on the quizzes, which you'll find after you do the ones on the test, you can do the ones on the quizzes. Not going to be an issue. And then I'd go back through the chapters, and I would make sure that I'm not kidding, I do this. I'd flip through the book, right? And it's not the whole book, you guys. It's about half the book, am I right? Half of it's problems, half of it is chapters, really, right? I would flip through there, though, and I'd look at everything that's highlighted, make sure I knew what it meant, right? Because there'll probably be some multiple guess, fill in the then make it easy, right? Oh, yeah, it's just associative recall with that kind of stuff, right? Get let into it. But then, and then as you go through, if you hit an area, you're like, wait a minute, I don't remember how to do any of that. And you might go find those problems that really count, right? If you want, you do problems at the end of the chapters, but I bet you don't have time. I bet if you went through all of them, we did a lot of quizzes and tests, didn't we? And then you got all those from the summer, too, from, I don't know, 2013. You can work all those again, right? Pretty good, okay? I think you get there. So, yeah, you can do all that. You got it, right? You learn what you should in the class. There's a lot there, isn't there, you guys? 14 chapters, whole book, right? So, yes, sir.
Could we do like 5 or 6 on 5 to 9, like the allowance and bad debt expense?
Well, sure, that'd be a really good idea. I don't know what it is about those, but like intermediate students get them wrong too. Still do. I just tease you guys. So they same thing to you guys. It's just once you see it, you see it, right? Okay, number 5 and 6. Yeah, let's do that. Good idea. Okay, on number 5, we're doing test 5 through 9. Number 5. Okay. Best Stores has credit sales of $750. All right, so let's just write this down. Okay. Has a debit balance of $2,000 allowance for doubtful accounts. What does that mean? They must have done what? Written off more than they had allowed for, right? You get a big credit balance, and then all of a sudden it's a debit. That means you wrote off more than they allowed for. You guys can used to know that. You cut yourself some slack, right? What am I always trying to do to you guys? You got a little carried away in this test, probably. But what am I trying to do to you guys? I want to stay a step ahead of you. I want to keep you going, keep you pushing. On the final, I don't do that. On the final, I just want to know what you know, okay? Will you guys study harder now for this final because I gave you a monster test? The answer is yes, because you're all survivors. You're like, geez, now I need more points. It's just awful. Of course it is. Okay? It does. Right? So dig in and go for it. You'll be fine. All right, anyway, allowance for doubtful accounts. With that, let's see, then what else do they have? The accounts receivable. That goes with the allowance on the balance sheet. Is that right, guys? $140,000. That's after all their sales on account and all their cash receipts done. It's the ending balance. Okay? All right, so then they think 5,500. They prepared an aging of these receivables. They did an aging of these, and they think 5,500 is not going to be collectible. What does that tell you? What account do you want to be 5,500 then? The allowance, sure. What goes on the income statement with sales? Bad debt expense. But I don't want bad debt expense to be that amount. I want the allowance to be that amount, right, guys? Because I'm estimating it based on receivables. Does everybody hear that? If you do your estimate based on the receivables, they age them right, how many are current, How many are 30 days past due? How many are 60 days past due? That sort of thing, right? Okay? And then they took a percentage of each of those, you know, and came up with an overall estimate. Or maybe they looked at all the accounts and figured out who's not going to pay them maybe, or made an estimate of that. So anyway, but they think what should be $5,500, the allowance. Is there anybody in the room that cannot take an account from a debit of 2 to a credit of 5,500? I bet you can. What do? Credit allowance for doubtful accounts for $7,500, right? And what do you have to debit, of course? Got to go to bad debt expense. You're forced to put it in bad debt expense. We did not estimate bad debt expense, it's just falling out, right? We estimated the allowance, okay? Everybody in the room knows this. I know you do, right? You can do this stuff. Just relax and do it. What does it ask for? So that's A. Then B says, on March 4th, 2014, before the write-off, assume that allowance balance of accounts receivable is 145. So we're changing the problem a bit. I've got accounts receivable. That's so it doesn't mess you up if you missed the first part of it. This was 145, okay? The allowance is 5,100. Okay? What's our net realizable account receivable, by the way? It's the difference between those two, right? 139,900, right? This less that. What's the net realizable receivable in the first one here? 140 less 5,500, what would that be? 134.5? This is easy, isn't it? Okay? How much you expect to collect? Make the appropriate entry to write off the sound account. Okay. It says March 4th, 2014, they authorized a write-off of 1,400 by sound. What are you going to write off? One of the receivables. You're giving up, right? Aren't you going to take 1,400 out of there because you're giving up? Absolutely. And you found one of the ones you had allowed for, so what are you going to do, guys? Debit the allowance. I'm dressed up today to honor students. Honors and awards and honors for people graduating. So. None for others, I suppose, too. Anyway, so what do we do here? Debit allowance for doubtful accounts, because I don't need it anymore because I found it. Right? That's the idea. And credit accounts receivable. Everybody good? What's the balance now in accounts receivable? After that. 143.6, is that what that is? What's the balance in the allowance now? 3,700, is that right? So then it says, okay, that's B. This little entry here. Okay. C. Show before and after the write-off how this would look. Well, here's before. Here's after. Accounts receivable less the allowance is net realizable accounts receivable, right? What do I mean by realizable? Cash I'm going to get paid. That's what I expect to be paid, right, guys? Okay, good. So what was it before? We did anything. 145, right? What was the allowance before we did anything, before we did the write-up? 5,100. What was the net accounts receivable? The difference? You guys agree with that? What do we say, 139.9? True? And what happened? I reduced both of them by the same amount, you guys. What's it still going to be? Of course, 139.9. And that's the point. The only time you would change the account is when you replenish the allowance at the end of the year, right? Or whenever you do financial statements. Okay? So what is that now? 143.6. And 3,700. 143.6 less 3,700 is 139.9. Both. Is that a hard problem? How many of you have 8 points on that? I'm just horrible at this every time. You guys going to have this for the final? If I give you one similar to this? Yep. And are you going to have the problem memorized, or are you going to know what you're doing? At some point, you can't memorize anymore, right? You just have to get it wired. Figure it out. understand what's going on. Okay, good. So let's get going. You guys wanted to do number 6 too, right? Number 6. Yeah, this is a real common question I give. The ledger of Tortilla Company at the end of the current year shows accounts receivable of 110 and sales of 700. Accounts receivable 110. That's on the balance sheet, right? Sales on the income statement 700. By the way, when you're thinking about this, I'm going to ask you 1/3 of the questions from test 1 through 4. I suggest what you do when you start your studying is go back and work the quizzes on the first 4 chapters and the tests on the first 4 chapters, and you will realize that where you guys are now and the work you put in, you're going to get 100% of that right. You're going to have 30 to 35% of the points on this test in a few minutes. You're just going to walk through. Then what do you have to do? See if you can get 50% the rest of the way. What do you think? So you got 30 to 35%, and then on the other 65 to 70%, you get half of it. What's your score? 60 to 70. What's a 60? B minus. What's a 70? A minus? What was it? B plus, A minus? Yeah, I'm not kidding. So could you get, the first 4 chapters, 100% of it, and then say 60% or 70% of the rest? Got the idea? Yeah. Are you going to get? Is your bond problem going to work out perfectly? Is your cash flow going to work out perfectly? I don't know. It might. It'd be nice if you did. Somebody will probably do that. Good for them, right? So it might not. Everything might not be perfect, but you're going to have a really good idea, aren't you? And especially, with enough time, your bond problem and your cash flow problem might work out perfect, right? With more time. So it'll be all right. So if you don't know something, you don't know something. Relax about it. I don't know most things. I managed to fumble through. Okay, what do we got here? Allowance. Goes with that on the balance sheet, right, with receivables. And bad debt expense. Goes with sales, doesn't it? Good. So journalize these. On part A, if the allowance has a debit balance of $2,000, so I've got a debit balance here. So that's the same situation we had at the first one, right? That's a 2. Okay, right? Had 2,000 at the beginning, debit. That means they wrote off more, right, than the original balance was. Good. Okay, and we expect bad debts to be 6% of accounts receivable. All right, bad debts are going to be 6% of this. How much is that? $6,600? It is, right? What account do you want to be $6,600? All you have to ask yourself is that what we want the allowance to be, or is that what we want bad debt expense to be? What did we base our estimate on? Accounts receivable. What are we estimating? Bad debts, but which bad debts? Allowance for doubtful accounts, allowance for bad debts, or bad debt expense? Which one are we estimating? What account represents the portion of the receivables you are never going to get? The allowance. What account represents the portion of the sales you're never going to get? Bad debt expense. You got it made, guys. If you know that, you've got it made, and it's common sense. What goes on the balance sheet with accounts receivable? The allowance. You show accounts receivable less the allowance is net realizable receivables, right? What goes on the income statement with sales? Bad debt expense, because that's what it is. It's the portion of the sales you're never going to get. Of course it goes on the income statement. Okay, so here we are estimating a portion of the receivables we're never going to collect. Of course, that's what we want the allowance to be. Now, it's not how much you're going to add to the allowance, it's what you want it to be, right, guys? So how much do we want it to be? 6,600. Does everybody see where the 6,600 came from? 110 times 6%, right? Okay? So if right now it's 2,000 and you'd like debit, and you'd like to be a credit of 6,600, how do you get there? Credit it for 8,600, and what do you debit? Well, you're forced to debit bad debt expense, which if you don't have a balance in bad debt expense, which means you didn't replenish it during the year. If you were putting some in every month, there'd be a balance there, right? Okay? But also you'd have a different allowance then, okay? So anyway, probably it's 0 now, so you're going to make the ending balance be 8,600 by debiting it for 8,600. What's your journal entry going to be for that? Debit bad debt expense. There it is. We just did it, didn't we? $8,600. Credit allowance for doubtful accounts, $8,600. Okay? I've still got people who are not using exactly that same journal entry in terms of the debits and credits and problems like this, making up accounts. What are you doing? We're replenishing the account, right? It's always going to be debit, bad debt, expense, credit, allowance when you replenish the account, right? Okay? So that's part A. Let's switch to B. It says, all right, before the write-off, accounts receivable account has 145 in it, okay? So this time accounts receivable is 145,000. Right? Sometimes I don't change them, huh? On the quiz, I don't think I changed them, did I?
I think you're looking at the wrong question. Line number 6.
Oops. I guess I didn't change them on this one either, did I? Thank you. That'd make it ridiculous. Oh, it didn't change. I didn't change anything on this one. Good. Doesn't matter. If I change the receivable, do you care? Nah, use whatever it is. If I change the allowance, do you care? Nah, use whatever it is. Okay, the receivable then stayed the same. Good. A little easier, I guess. 110,000. What's the allowance? This time it has a credit of 2,200. Okay. That means that our beginning balance was bigger than what we wrote off during the year, right? Yeah, that's all. Okay, so what do we want to do now? What's sales? Still 700,000. Didn't change that. That time that's a 7. Okay, bad debt expense? Probably 0 right now, huh? Okay, what does it say? They think bad debts are expected to be 6% of accounts receivable. Same thing, isn't it? 6% of this. What account do I want to be 6% of accounts receivable? The allowance. What's 6% of the receivable? 6,600. Except this time I have 2,200 in there, and I wish it was 6,600. What are we going to do, guys? 4,400. Got it. I'm going to credit for 4,400, and I'm going to debit bad debt expense for 4,400, and that is my entry. Is this easy? Yeah, it's really easy. These are free points. And you guys are sitting there looking at your test and saying, no, they weren't. I got 4 of them. How many of you got 4 on this? No? 4? 8? You got 8. None? Oh my. Oh my. That's not going to happen anymore, right? Geez, come on, you guys. You're smart people. Okay, anyway. All right. Let's see. That's fine. I have a nephew, just funny kid. I have a number of nephews that are funny people, actually. But anyway, when he was 12, I played ping pong against him, and I worked my ass off and beat him. He was playing all the time, right? And his mom was kind of, you beat my 12-year-old son, and I'm just sweating. He's sweating. I said, yeah, because I still can. He's 25 now. And we were together last summer. He says, so you want to play some ping pong? And I said, okay. Yeah, all right, fine, if you insist. And he started laughing and just destroyed me. Just absolutely destroyed me. Should I beat a 12-year-old kid at ping pong? Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And then I refused to play him again, by the way, after I did. I was way too tired. I was already old, right? Yeah, sure. Did it to my brother-in-law, too, when he was in high school. I was dating his sister, and he beat him in tennis, just completely trashed him. And then I refused to play against him after that. That's enough of that. Oh, well, anyway, so I'm doing the same thing to you guys. I think it's really neat. You guys are all smarter than me, and you're younger than me, and you haven't killed brain cells, and I can do stuff you can't in this little tiny area, right? Of course, how many things can you do that I can't do? And pretty soon you'll be better at this than I am, right? That's the idea. That's what we're trying to do here, right? When I'm an old man, and I'm hanging out with my great-grandkids, I hope I live that long. Oh my God, I'll be 100, right? Wouldn't that be cool, right? and I'm doing absolutely nothing, my brain is dead, you guys make me make a living, okay? Running the country, that's the idea. Okay, let's do C. Everybody's leaving. Thought it was time to go. Anyway, all right, so we left the 110 here, right? We left the 700 here. We have an allowance of what? Credit balance of 3,200? Okay. And what do we think? We think bad debts is 1% of sales. What's 1% of sales? 7,000. What account do you want to be 7,000? What goes on the income statement with sales? Bad debt expense. I want this to be 7,000. How do I make it 7,000 when it's nothing? Debit it for 7,000. What is that going to force me to credit for 7,000? The allowance. Oh man. Okay. Debit bad debt expense. Notice they are always the same journal entry, just different amounts, of course. 7,000. And then I love this last one. This is really fun. D. Look at that. If the allowance has a debit balance, so well, look at it. Let's do these separate, I guess. It's exactly the same, right? It's going to be exactly the same entry even. Why? Because I'm basing it on sales. Accounts receivable is 110,000. Sales is 700,000. Allowance, what is it this time? Debit of 2,400. What's bad debt expense? Nothing. What are you going to do, guys? I am going to take 1% of 700,000 again. I did the same, didn't I? That's 7,000, isn't it? I want this to be 7,000. It's going to force me to add 7,000 to the allowance, isn't it? What am I going to have in the allowance now? 4,600. Everybody agree with that? Debit bad debt expense, of course, for 7,000. And credit the allowance for 7,000. Okay, I want you guys to do another thing for me here. I want you to tell me what net realizable accounts receivable is in all four of those. Calculate. What if I gave you, added that to the problem, which is a nice thing I could do on a final, right? Give you some free points. You now know what the balance is, right, in all the accounts. Net realizable accounts receivable is what? The accounts receivable less the allowance? It's 110 less 6,600 to the first one, isn't it? What's net accounts receivable here? Net realizable accounts receivable. What is it? You just take 110 less 6,600, wouldn't you? How much is that? This was good stuff to cover, don't you think? On our receivables today. Okay. By the way, do you guys do this stuff on your own? Yes, yes, yes. Pound through them. Don't just work them. Understand them, right? Know what you're doing. Replicate it. Do it again. How much is that? 1014, is that what it is? 400. Just 110 less 8,600. What's the next one? Oh, 1064. Where did I get that? No. 110 less 6,600. I apologize. Yeah. What is that? 1044? 1034. Okay, sorry. Thank you. 103.4, isn't it? Yeah. Got it wrong. The balance, right? So the 110 in receivables less 6,600 ending balance in allowance. What's the next one going to be here? 110 less 6,600. How much is that? Oh. How about that? They're the same numbers. Of course they are, right? Because we estimated what we wanted the allowance to be. So the net accounts receivable would be 1034. Yeah, again, how about that? What a deal. Okay, what'll happen on this one? On this one, bad debt expense is 7,000 on both these last two. Bad debt expense is 7,000 both times, but what's going to happen to the net accounts receivable? They'll be different, of course, right? Because you have different ending balances in the allowance. So what do you got, 110 less, what? What was that, 10.2? So we got 110 less 10,200, what do you get, 90,800? 99,800, is that right? Okay. Yeah, you got that one. What's this one here? Like 110 less what? 4,600. How much is that? 105.4. Could you do that for me? Yeah, big deal. Want to do something else? That's a quick one. How many are going to come today? Good. We'll have a handful. We got 3 here. We got 3, 4 from the other class. Sorry. Maybe we'll do depreciation today, huh? Review. Let's not do that now. Present values are on here. Let's do some multiple choice ones. Maybe. Student on page 5. Which of the following tasks does the SEC not perform? Oh, the SEC. That's the governmental entity, right? Securities and Exchange Commission. Overseeing the work of the FASB? Yep. The FASB writes generally accepted accounting principles. The SEC encourages them to do that, and then if the SEC disagrees with them, they make them change it. Basically, is what happens, right? Okay, political process. Overseeing the work of the public company oversight board, right? Yeah, they do that. That's peekaboo, right? They're responsible for protecting investors, maintaining the integrity of the securities markets. That's why they do A and B, right? That's their job. That's their function. Development of gap? Nope. Development of gap's done by the FASB. Why? Because the SEC doesn't have the staff to do it, right? Okay. They have the expertise to do it. The people they do have, but they just don't have anywhere near it. As many people as the FASB can afford to hire. They don't have the money. They're funded by Congress, right? FASB's funded by the profession. The profession has money. Congress doesn't. Congress spends, they have money, of course, but they're spending on all kinds of things. So it's D. Which of the following are primary responsibilities of the information provided in the financial statements? Who's responsible? The company is, not the auditor, right? So it's not the internal and external auditors. It's not the SEC, that's for sure, right? They're reporting to the SEC. The chief executive officer, CEO, and chief financial officer? Yes. In fact, the woman who came and spoke the other day, who's been a CFO for Brown Forman, she was talking about when they brought in Sarbanes-Oxley, it put real teeth into this, right? The Sarbanes-Oxley Act. You can go to jail for falsifying financial statements now, for knowing that financial statements are wrong and signing. The CEO and the CFO, if they sign knowing they were wrong, it's not just fines, it's jail terms now, and people have gone to jail for this. Okay, you're stealing from stockholders, right? And from lenders and stuff. People use these statements, right, to make decisions. If you lie in them, you defraud them. Okay? So that's the answer. It's not the external auditors and the board of directors. Conservatism, what's that? On conservatism, we got a minute. Come on, guys. You know what your money's worth, right? Yeah, whatever that means. Assets, liabilities, plus. If I'm being conservative, I do not intentionally misstate the financial statements, right? But if I never do that. But if I am choosing, that's not conservative, that's just wrong. If I'm choosing between competing estimates are just as good as each other, which one would I choose? I would choose the ones that are more conservative. What does that mean? That would lead to less assets. That would lead to more liabilities. Both of those would tend to reduce equity. Getting the drift of this? If I'm choosing between really good estimates, I'll take the ones that are more conservative. Less assets, more liabilities, right? In both cases, less equity. Less revenues. That'll give me less income. Guess what that does? Gives me less equity, right? More expenses. What does that do? Less income. What does that do? Less equity. Got the idea? That's all you got to know, okay? So about conservatism. So we're careful. Everybody says accountants are conservative. It doesn't mean because we wear white shirts, right? It's this, okay? All right. Conservatism requires that special care be taken to avoid the following. It's C. We want to be careful not to overstate assets, right? We want to avoid that. And we don't want to understate liabilities, right? And we don't want to overstate revenues, and we don't want to understate expenses. All that stuff looks real familiar with what we've been doing, huh? Which of the following is an objective external audit of the company's financial statements? We want to add credibility to the statements. When you pick up those statements, we want you to feel comfortable about those statements. So you can decide whether or not you want to invest in the company. So if you have 3 companies, 2 have been audited, 1 hasn't, and they all look about the same, what happens to the one that hasn't been audited? Throw that one away. Pretty much. Because you don't know. Why didn't you get an audit, for crying out loud? They're trying to get people to invest in them that don't even know them, right? You don't know the manager. You don't know the owners. You don't know what they do. You're reading their statements to make decisions about them, right? And you look at everything else you can find out. Is that the idea? So an audit adds credibility. So which one is that? C. You guys. Study, study, study. Don't get discouraged. If you're mad at me and it makes you work harder, good. If your feelings are hurt and it makes you work harder, good. If you work harder, it'll work out. Okay? See you guys. Didn't I give you at the bottom of your test?
The total amount of points that we have in the cost?
Yeah.
Oh,
After your deduction. I gave everybody theirs. I did give it to you.